my kids are now 15 and 11. I see them as a single oak tree in the middle of a big field, no other trees around. And I am what they stand under, protect them from rain and storms. And there's a swing on there, and it's where we play, and it's where the sun comes. And it's always there. And no matter how much you try to shake or rock that oak tree, no. Other people may be able to shake me at this point in time in my life, but nothing my children can say or do shakes me.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Inventor and author of Primal Habits, Uninflamed, Master of You, and Body Thrive, and soon to be released, The Witch's Cancer Journal.
A weaver of words and ancient worlds into the future.
Plumbing for depth in the playground of your continual reinvention.
A wisdom bridge, Agayana Yogini.
And now the moment we've been waiting for is here.
Ringleader of Club Thrive and Wellness Pro Academy.
A freedom warrior, earth mother, proud mama, devoted wife.
Not your grandmother's Ayurveda.
Futurist. Biohacker. Guru and Goofball.
Where truth and freedom prevail.
Evolving the ancient into the future.
Welcome to the Thrive with Cate Stillman podcast. Made for you by us.
And we're grateful for that too, because then we have a record through you, which is pretty cool for us. That's so good. That's so cool to see how, what I'm noticing with this Benjamin Hardy's 10X is easier than 2X, and how he keeps pointing everything into the who, not how, 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 is then you start to see how, or at least I'm seeing the Indra's web effect, right? So you guys know the story of Indra's web, the myth? No? Does anyone? No. Oh, okay, cool. So Indra's web, it's like, imagine the galaxy of galaxies. The constellations are like gems in a spider web. And how constellations unite individual stars creates this tantra, this like warp weft effect. And so when we're like, a lot of the 10X thing is realizing that there's a new floor. You're like, oh, there's a new floor. So it's like a lot of what you're trying to do, what we're all trying to do, is like get above this new dimension enough to like, you know, when you're getting out of the pool, right? And there's like gravity and there's water element, which is heavy and dense and moist, and but it's like also buoyant, right? And so you're trying to like push down and like get into the air and then like get on the side of the pool. And you've got to find that new floor, but it's like, and you get little glimpses of it, right? Like Indy and I were doing 1-arm pull-ups in the hot tub from the pool last night, you know, and it's like, you get glimpses of it, and we couldn't do it anymore. Cause like the people were just like, what are you guys doing? I'm like, we're just being total, like, just, you know, goofballs. Oh, hi. And they're sitting up there, and then we're like, oh my God. So trying to get above. And once you're at that new floor, the way that it works with Indra's web is you're in a different frequency, vibration, dimension. And so there's a bit of like learning the rules of like, how does it work up here? So there's a lot of beginner's mind and not knowing, right? And just kind of checking it out and being like, how is this game played here? Because chances are I know how the game is played down there. And like, that's cool. Like, because you can always go visit. You can always jump in the pool again, right? You can always go back. We're just 10Xing.
Got it.
Sorry. The whole idea is that your 10X self has it's not a totally different reality. It's just a 80% different reality. So it's the Pareto's principle, right? So you get to select the 20 that's 10X in the past. That's why you keep looking back to go forward. So you keep looking back, like, where have I 10X? Where have I done that? And it's going to not be the way that someone else did. And that's your unique star and interest web. So the more you act like that, like, right, and you just keep selecting the 20%, adding 80% new at the next level, like, whoop, above, right? And now I'm on the side. I got out of the water. Now I can look around. I'm now moving in air, ether, so I'm connected. Still grounded, right? Because I came out of the water, that whole amphibian thing. So then you're standing on the side of the pool and you're like, there's a new floor. And this thing has rules. Like there's rules of the road. Now, the only way you get to stay there is if you commit. So that's the game. And it's a game. And it's important to remember that it's a game. Like, and we see that in multiple traditions. What's that myth, that Mesopotamian myth? Gilgamesh? Is anyone familiar with the myth of Gilgamesh? Any Gilgamesh fans? A little bit? Do you want to put it in the pot? No? Okay. Well, Gilgamesh was like the bomb, right? He was like bro bra guy. Yeah. He was like the white guy that's like born with like good looks and is like smart enough to get into MIT. He's like that guy, right? And he's really fucking strong like Hercules. So he's got a full package guy. And there's like no one that can compete with bro bra, Gilgamesh. But then this like twin brother dark side wild man shows up on the scene, and he's wild. He's raised by wolves. So you got Gilgamesh, who's like the king of the city, and then you got like wild guy. And so they send in like this hot chick to tame wild guy. Works every time. This is like a 6,000-year-old story, right? Works every time. So she tames him and she brings him into the city, and he's like wild, like very Shiva, very much like this predecessor of Shiva in the Indian mythology. But it comes from Mesopotamia, which is where most of the Greco-Roman Christian mythologies come from, right? Okay. So anyways, then they play a game, right? These brothers now, they're constantly playing games, and they're using the spirit of competition to see where it goes, to like climb the ladder, to keep getting to the next dimension. They use duality, yin yang, friction, right? And then there's a million stories that we're not going to get into. But the whole idea is that it's a game. And so in many ways, it's like, who are you playing that game with, right? It's like there's polarities within the self, and you're using that dynamicism. So you're selecting the 20, you're blowing that up, but you're also like adding new. And that's those rungs of the ladder. So if you don't know the rules at this floor, right? We're playing video games here. You just gotten to the next level, like, but there's new guys and you don't know what they do. And you don't know how to like make your new amigos, and also know like who to give a little bit of space to, right? And that's Indra's web. It's like, well, how does it work? How does the web work at this dimension? So people set, tool set, skill set, mindset, right? The commitment, it's this commitment to Dharma at this next level. So in the way that it works, plays out, I would say more in like Indian philosophy, but I see threads of it in Christian philosophy, is it's like something's got to die on the altar. So build an altar, like whatever that is for you, whatever that means to you. Like there's an altar, and you got to take that 80% and you just got to like lay it there and just be like, I guess I'm letting this go. 80%. It's fucking ridiculous, isn't it? Like, is anyone almost offended about this? It's like, no, like 80 per, yeah, right. And you thought you were good. Well, from what I can tell about cancer will take 100%. So we're getting off easy. Totally getting off easy with this one, like, because you get to select. That raises the bar of consciousness. That's moksha. That's now the new floor. And then dharma, artha, and kama sit on that floor. So what does that mean? And I'll show you guys pictures of this. What it looks like is, first of all, start with kama. Kama, dharma, well, actually the order is actually artha, kama, dharma, moksha. Those are the four, these are like the four aims in yoga. So if they're like, what's the aim of yoga? And you're like, well, actually, there's four. You know this one, Lynn?
Just being like funny, like, oh, I know the four aims, right? Like the good student.
Yeah, totally. I know the four aims, but it's really fucking helpful. And this is where like, you know, the nice thing about the Vedic system is that they just numbered everything so you could remember it. Whereas like the Christian, and, you know, if we look at like the Judeo-Christian, like they did stories, not so many numbers, lots of stories. Stories are also easy to remember, right? So numbers, stories. The Vedics like to number things. So you've got these four aims, and artha is like you've got your stuff set up. So in Master Review book, that's space. Like your space is set. What that means in behavioral science or organizational behavioral science is that you've architected your environment for that 20%. to thrive. You've architected the environment according to the new rules. You guys with me on that? And you know it, and you can sniff it out, and like 1010% trust your intuition on that and go hard on that one, because that's your easy win. Like that is your total easy win, because it's material, it's physical, it's easy to see, and you can smell it. So anything that's involving smell, you're hitting a level of instinct that you can't get to without smell. So in smell, sense of smell is earth element. It holds the memory of the past. So it's really important to like use smell. Anosmia. Did you guys ever have anyone have a friend or family member lose their sense of smell during the whole COVID thing? Yeah. So that anosmia was a symptom of COVID, and that's like the severity of dysbiosis. So you want to smell it out. Like, for instance, I just came down to Mexico and I'm like, oh, I can smell mold. Ozone is my new best friend because ozone kills mold and other bacteria. So it was like, oh, interesting. Huh. That's outdated. That's so easily able to identify the 80%. But there will be, figurative, symbolic mold. You know what I mean? Okay. So that's arta, that's space. Then kama is normally listed as number 2, and it's pleasure, but it's somatic pleasure. It's not intellectual pleasure. It's not ownership, materialistic security pleasure. That's all arta. That's all arta. Kama is like, this feels good. Like, I know this is right because this feels good, right? That's like the divine feminine Shakti stuff that got like cultured out with the puritanical types, right? That are like, no, you can't feel pleasure. Pleasure is wrong and bad. So that hurt human culture. It's kind of what led to the current state of food, which shout out to Mark Hyman, who's really trying to turn things around. Massive shout out to Mark Hyman. All right. So kama is it feels good. So you got to lead with the body on this one. This is entirely somatic. Like if you have to pee and you're sitting at your desk, that's wrong. If you're wearing clothes and you can't breathe, like that's wrong. Right. And it's that. It's like, if you're like, I'm going to work out later, that's wrong. Right. Or I'm going to eat this because I want to feel good. That's usually wrong. Right. It's like, you got to take care of that feeling in some other way. And that's that 80%. That's like, okay, that's going, that's done. But then there's a whole other level of kama. And that's the good news, people. Right. There's a whole other dimension of kama. There's a whole other dimension of arta. There's a whole other dimension of dharma. So then dharma is this like meaning, purpose, you, unique you, star in Indra's web, like the shining amethyst you, right? That's the 20% of dharma. And every 10x you've done so far is helping you figure out that. So there's a pattern. Do you guys know how pattern recognition is a factor? Like the most, I would say there's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 factors determining IQ. And pattern recognition is high up there. It's like people who can see physics. You know what I mean? Like they just see it. They just see pattern recognition. It's like, yeah. And you could apply that to any domain, I would think. Biology, chemistry, etc. All right. So the Dharma is pointing like 20%. And then all of that leads to moksha. And moksha is the experience of enlightenment. So moksha is like, what's the difference between yoga and moksha? And they would maybe say something like moksha is like the cream on top of the milk. Right. So it's connected to the Anandamaya kosha. It's connected to the bliss body, which is why you use kama as an indicator to the bliss body. But you also use your intellectual connection, like where you're connecting with other people and you're like, oh, I'm lit up. Oh, I'm actually lit up in my body. Like this idea lights me up in my physiology. That's how you're like, oh, this must be part of that path to moksha. I must be like on the hunt, on the right thing. Okay. So what I thought we would do today, well, actually, I wanted to show you guys something. This kind of tripped me out. Has anyone seen this before? This is a picture from Master View from the book in the curriculum. This is like my old school drawing of it though. So I drew this, right? So buried dreams start here. And then you have ethos, and then you have space, earth, fire, air, water. So you have the 5 elements. Then you have next level you. And this is you and your future identity. Mine, the cape says live in the dream. I know that's kind of small. Right. And then the idea is that the rungs of the ladder, that climbing up, right? You're moving through the 5 elements. And the 5 elements connect to everything. You can connect it to, arta, kama. Like kama would be more watery. Dharma would be more fiery. Moksha would be more the subtler, etherically And the climbing itself is the air, is the movement through. And Arta is physical, right? Material. So that's earth element. So listening to 10x is easier than 2x, and getting that each one of these. Another way to think about it is you can take 20% of each element. So when you look around your space, it's like, okay, 20%. So if you look in your kitchen, right? If you look in your refrigerator, right? It's like, it's a way of looking at that refinement of like something energetically just goes. It's a new standard, right? You're setting the new standard. And what you're saying is like, at this level, shit gets really cool. So I'm curious. I'm curious enough to let the ego drop a lot of baggage, just like Michael said in the beginning of the call, like fall, leaves, right? We've got all of these traditions around like turning back to the ancestors. The ancestors represent the existing 20% of the past that you're taking the information from, right? You're saying like that 10x went forward. How do we know a 10x? Because you're alive. You made it. Yeah. So it's like, what did they do that worked? Okay. So let's look at a few more pictures just for fun. Okay. So figuring out the floor. I'll just go through some images of what we just talked about. Okay. What no longer fits the floor. Commit to the next floor. So you're looking stage by stage. And the part of what you guys are so used to in here is that it's always an iterative process. We don't really do anything that's not an iterative process. So the idea is like, this is a tool, just like the gap and the gain, which we learned 2 years ago, right? That's a very helpful context. The way you figure out the floor is through the gain, like noticing the 10 things, the 10x's from your past, noticing the 10x's from your ancestors, noticing the 10x that you've already done in space element, the 10x you've already done in fire element and air element and ether element and earth element, right? So you get to notice that, capture that, know that that's pointing towards, that's like getting you up the ladder, right? That's pointing you in the right direction. And there's just like chaos and mayhem everywhere else, all around you, trying to distract you, trying to make you a fucking idiot, right? Like that's just the nature of living in today's world, is it's like, wow, people are having a hard time out there. So how do you need to protect yourself? And then how easy can that be to protect yourself? Okay. So commit, courage, confidence. Once you commit, right, then you're going to get tested and you'll fail. And that's kind of the point. Just like when you get to the next level in the video game, you're not good. Did anyone hear Lex Fridman talk with Elon Musk a week or so ago? They talk about video games for a long time. I guess Elon is also world-class as a video game player, which is actually quite hard to be. I'm guessing the Asperger's helps a lot. In any case, they kind of just talk about this, how like he has not figured out this like death viper thing, and he gets just toasted every time at some level, at some new game. I don't know anything about video games. Okay, so what the new death vipers are going to show up, right? So if you don't even know what you're committed to, you're fucked from the beginning. It doesn't matter if you have courage, because you don't even know what you're doing. So you've got to know what you're committed to, and that's the why. So in Body Thrive, in that book, we talk about the what and the why, like what's your what and what's your why. Like if you don't know your why, when the death vipers show up, like you're fucked, right? Because the why is the power. That's like why. This is why. Even if it's just like you want to check out 10x, because why not? That's a good enough why to me personally, right? It's just like, if that exists, yeah, sure. I always like the good stuff, Jovan knows she likes the good stuff too. Right? So it's like, if that's there, why not? If you can 10x your human physiology, why not? If you can, 10x your human experience, 10x whatever it is that your dharma is trying to get you to 10x. And if you just tune in, then you're in the Indra's web at the next level. Okay, so then how do you demonstrate that commitment in yoga? The word for this is kriya, and it's very helpful to know. Kriya, because kriya is different than karma. Kriya and karma both mean action. You guys have heard the word karma, right? A lot. But kriya, less, or about the same? Who's heard kriya? A bit? Yeah. So kriya is just spontaneous action. So karma leaves a residue. Kriya doesn't. Does anyone have like glasses and you wash them in the dishwasher and they come out with the spots? And even though they say the thing on the commercial for the thing doesn't leave the spots, there's still the spots. Like that's karma. Kriya is no spots. and it's spontaneous, meaning you didn't premeditate it. Like you got the rules of the game. Now you're just playing the game. You're just playing the game. You're totally somatically led, connected, like in the game because it's a game and it's fun. So are you all stressed out about 10xing, whatever it is that's 10xing? Nope, because it's a game. You're just playing a game. You play it from a place of surrender, right? You're just having fun, playing the game, and you're surrendering. You're surrendering to that new 80%, right? And that's where it's like, okay, this is not about stressing myself out. It's the opposite of that. It's getting so much more curious and where's the flow and how easy can it be? And what the fuck pathological bullshit has to get out of the way that you have to drop off at the nearest station, right? So that you can get on with the show. Okay, so that's how it worked. We're going to skip all these relationship things, commit to the new floor. So part of it is realizing the leaves falling from the tree back there, what no longer fits. So let's take a moment and do this one. I think we should just speak to it rather than journal and write it down. If you want to write it down and all the people are talking, that's fine. But has anyone just gotten a hit while I've been talking about like just what no longer, like you just know it no longer fits? Okay, I'll give you 1 minute. Just take a moment and reflect. It'll be easier. If it helps to go through the levels of it, let's do that. So you can look at it. You can look at it with each element. One way of looking at it is like, okay, here's the floor. What's now showing up that's like below the floor as best as you can tell? Sometimes having statements like that, like you don't have to be right here. What's as best as you can tell is below the floor, and then what's above the floor. You know, so even with like detoxing and things like that, it's often you have like a new rule book in terms of like nourishment. So you could just look at like, okay, what's coming up around nourishment? What's coming up around work? So things that you don't do anymore, things that you do in the future. What's coming up around relationships? What do you no longer do? And then on this side is, what are you committed to?
I think I have some examples then.
Yeah.
So it came up actually last week on my work trip. So I was leading an audit, and what I found, I was so much better at taking the themes and information people were getting, because I was just like everyone else. We're all looking for things. And for me, that bigger, I guess, vision or story, and like, this is how things are. So for me, that's my above the floor is, it's not that I don't want to do the work, but I don't need to be in those weeds anymore. And so
you don't need the what anymore? In the weeds?
Yeah, I don't need to be in the weeds.
Okay.
And that would be for work, where I can just start seeing things. And I had this conversation with a coworker today. It's like, I was explaining, like, how do I write down what I'm seeing? Because it's just, I know, you know? And so like, we had to talk through like how I can show what I know, because that's just more intuitive, the work that I'm doing. So that would probably be something else I'm committed to, is having more intuitive work, which is very fascinating for as much from where I come from, where everything is really data driven and written down.
Right. So maybe it's like that part of Endra's Web is like, what's, you know, because what should happen out of this, you guys, is like questions should arise. So what is the connection between data and intuition?
Mm-hmm.
What's this relationship? Like, what's the yin yang of, you know?
Mm.
And one of the ways of asking is like, what's intuition without data? What's data without intuition? And just see what, use your intuition. Trust what comes through.
Right.
So what I notice with intuition is all of this work relies on intuition. The data, what Ben is saying and Dan is saying, is that the data, let me write that in a way that it actually looks like I wrote data, that you get the data, and this is going to be obvious, Lynn, by looking back.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah.
We don't have data on the future. We have projections. So then what's data versus projections? And then, what's the relationship between projections and intuition? Like, I can project that if Michael has X number of leads a week, he's going to crush it and bringing new members in if they're the right leads, right? And that's a projection or forecast. And if I don't have the data from the past to know how many conversations he's going to need to have, of what quality, of what background type, et cetera, if I don't have the data, then it's kind of a bullshit number. Yeah.
And that's interesting, as I've looked at the past numbers for what the past data was, to be able to create what my projections will be for 2024, which is all based upon the desire of what I wanted to bring to the company when interviewing.
And where you put your attention grows.
Focus code, energy flows, focus code.
Right. So that's the 20%. So what's the relationship between the 20% that's getting carried into the future? So future self, which is intuitive, and it's pulling from the data, which is the past. So that 20% is an intuitive process, but it gets the hit from looking back at the data. So this is where that like your past and Dan and Ben wrote a book on it, right? That's the gap and the gain of just like mine the fuck out of what's happened. Right? Like that's where the gold is. Like, and the trust that comes because you get to trust your own path. That's like your own star in Indra's web. This is your unique unicorn butterfly self, right? Like that's what you're mining for. So what's coming up in terms of tuning into intuition? I can share one of the things that's coming up with me. Actually, I think I wrote them all down. We can look at them. Here we go. This is big. Telling the story, telling the inside story. So Witch's Cancer Journal coming out in January. Like the writing is really, Kristen, you've read it. I'm still writing it, but Kristen, she read an edition of it. I've never told the inside story, right? And it's like totally TMI. Everything about this book is TMI, right? But like what's coming through 1,000% in my intuition is like, so it happened. It's a journal. It's not saying it's true. It's not saying it's right. It's not like there's nothing you have to defend. It's a fucking journal. That's it. And what we're finding in Mia coming on the team a few months ago, Mia, who I met in India and was guided there from my intuition. And what came out of that is now she is like we joke that she and her sister are my adopted daughters. She came in, started videoing all the stuff I do and started spinning it out on social media, right? Which is like something that's been a missing piece in my team forever. Let's just be clear. Because like, I won't take the time to like deal with all the fucking shit of getting it off the phone and onto the web. There's just a lot to do that right. And I had no fiber until like 2 months ago. It's really weird. Like this whole set of circumstances where I've been like in the dark. Mia comes and she starts posting. Did you guys see the coffee anima short? Yeah, Lynn did. So that one's gotten some hits. I got some hate mail on it a few days ago, which was, yeah, totally. I got some hate mail and some love mail. I got like both within 24 hours. Yeah, but there's this person in the world that like really it really triggered her. She's high Pitta, Ayurveda, very saintly Ayurveda. So the saints, right? You've got the saints and the martyrs and the sinners, and I'm a sinner. So, you got to play the game with the saints when you're a sinner. So what did we find? People like the inside story. They want to see how I do it. How do you do it? It's how you do it. So when I show me doing a thing, it gets tons of hits. Different than me talking about doing a thing. Not the same thing. Not the same thing. Me saying why I'm doing something, not the same thing. So like Cancer Journal, there's not much. There's some explanation, but it's more of like, this is what I'm doing right now. This is this is what the fuck's going on. This is TMI to the hilt. Okay. 100% somatic based living. So karma and moksha connection feedback loop. Like what that means is that just living completely somatically. I don't really know entirely how that, I have a lot of, it's just very much at this point, like reptilian, like just complete regression into the early phases of physiological childhood development, like crawling around on the floor a lot, hanging, swinging, doing all sorts, like just very somatically based living, see what I eat. Like yesterday I was eating these tacos with my hands and making it was pretty messy. It was like really deeply enjoying my food, just Indian style really, but I'm in Mexico. So that shit seems weird. It's not how Mexicans eat tacos. It is kind of how Indians eat Indian food. So whatever that is, right? It's very clear to me that that's what is at the next level. Other things, 100% intuitive medicine, meaning like I source what I should do from within 100%. Sometimes that leads me to other people and other things. Like I recently discovered ozone gas and bought a couple machines and I'm like totally into ozone. I tend to jump into the deep end with both feet over my head. So that's what I'm doing right now with ozone. Completely intuitive. Okay. Certification courses are connected to Club Thrive Properties and franchising. I don't really even understand what this is, but I'm just pretty clear because all these people are showing up around these things. So that's part of the Dharma, the fire element. So if I look at these in terms of the 5 elements, tell the inside of the story. This is air element because it's communication. Somatic based living. This is really body. So I'm going to say this is like both earth, water. Both those, like the lower chakras is Kama. 100% intuitive medicine. I would say this is ether. This is Akasha because it's completely intuition. So the lightest of the elements. Certification course, planetary properties, all this is like fire. I'm just like shit I do with my mind that moves things around. I make phone calls, I sign papers, like things happen and ideas take off. And it's like very much this intellectual property meets earth property. So I want you guys to do this. I'm wondering if it'll be helpful if I give us like 3 or 4 minutes just to like look at yours and just start like, what are they? And I'm hoping that some of these words help, like looking at it elementally might help. Also working at it from that place of nourishment, work, relationships. What are you committed to? What do you no longer do? The importance here is like define the floor so you can notice when you like jumped in, like you're going to like fall in the pool by mistake. You know what I mean? Where you're like, oh, I'm wet. Now I got to climb back up because I don't do that anymore because I'm committed to something else. Jovan.
Okay. I think I need a little bit of extra guidance because what's coming up for me is like a lot of very much like work scenarios.
That's fine. I would just go with whatever's coming up. So should we do that?
Yeah. Like
we'll just say here's the floor and what's now. And it's you guys. Oh my gosh. Did I tell you about the book? No, no, yes, yes. Okay, it was Indy's first book. I like fell in love with this book. It was just like a little, those like tiny books that are made out of cardboard. So there's this little baby, and the only words in this book were no, no, and yes, yes. So on every page, it was like no, no, and like the baby would like be having the toilet paper like all over the bathroom, right? And yes, yes, it was like this is how you use toilet paper, and it went through everything, with the dog and the food and like all the things. So you're like, and I love that book. I read that book 25,000 times, I think. Okay, so it's Jovan and work. What do you got? What's your no? Let's start there. Or your yes. We can start with either one. The yes comes out of what you've 10x'd in the past.
I think I'm starting with no. So I think it's related to kind of the type of leader I want to be, what I'm trying to work toward, and I'm 6 months in, so it's all new. So I'm getting those new responses, the new feedback. So it's like I'm mapping a company culture, creating a company culture that that should be quite freeing for people. But I'm now realizing that this shift is going to end up leaving certain employees behind because they can't handle the freedom or the accountability that comes with that kind of freedom. So
define what's no in the culture. Like what's a behavior
in the current culture?
No, like in the future culture, right? We're saying the future culture.
Oh, in the future culture. Okay, the future self, right.
Like what's something that happens that you're like, no, can't keep doing this. It doesn't lead in the right direction.
Like just poor planning, chaos, last minute non-decisions or non-decisions that lead to last minute chaos, poor management, lack of accountability.
Great. So with
people straying out of their lanes, like, not respecting expertise.
Yep. Good. Keep going.
I mean, disrespectful leadership, not understanding like when there is a no, if the answer is no, then it is no and you move on, like those kind of things, right? And inability to respect deadlines, mismanagement of money.
No wonder you got hired.
Yeah. It's been a week, Cate. Yeah.
It's been a week. So what have your 10Xs in the past enabled you to even see this shit that's going down? And you can go ancestral because like we're all tapped into this sort of Day of the Dead, like Halloween, like all that stuff's going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, a lot of this has been pretty straightforward and obvious to me from the beginning. And so like from the beginning of my work life, career life, even like I went to art school, I have my degree in like fine art photography, but I always understood that was a business, that anything that you do where you're spending your time and you need to make money to support yourself as a business. So I've always understood that strategy. And I guess I can just call that ancestral because I've always understood it.
Right. So we could say that could be like innate ability. So we could just say like innate ability around high level organizational.
Yeah.
Like it's to me, it's like
meta, business operation. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You've got a meta view and you're strong in people culture, right? So you've got meta view for like both the system and the people. Yeah.
I do. The people part is making me laugh a little bit because it's
more on meta and system.
It's meta and system. It's an understanding of like of people. Like, this is your strength. These are areas that, require a little bit of growth that, like I can really cut through the bullshit and see those things, but that's not always received well. So there's that part, there's that tension, where I'm not very good at being nice about it. Yeah.
All right. So that's perfect, because that also points out to the new yes of it's like, oh, how do I figure out that part? Who's the who on that? Does anyone know anyone that's like, oh my gosh, incredibly diplomatic with how they go about massive when massive transformation is? I mean, like if I look at John Friend, who was my yoga teacher for a while there, he would do it at the level of Kriya. Like he would move us through it. He wasn't a perfect guy at all, right? But like he could really see the potential and get us there and like move hundreds of people through that. And it's unpleasant. It is tapas is by definition, I would say tapas is unpleasant. Craig Hamilton was another one. Just like very skillfully could call us on our bullshit and teach us mechanisms to be able to do that with each other, which then elevated the conversation. Because if you look at, are you familiar with Lencioni and 5 Dysfunctions of a Team?
No.
Meet your new who.
Okay.
So a who here on Teams is Patrick Lencioni, Italian, American. Read 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And if you see like, oh, wow, we're working with all 5, don't worry about it. It's like, no wonder. Of course. Okay. Of course we got 5. Of course, like this is that. And everyone learns it. Just like, like there's these guys. Oh God, I used to fucking hate this as a yoga teacher when people be like, you're at like a cocktail party or whatever. And you're talking to some like old stiff guy and he's like, oh, I do yoga, but I'm not flexible. You're just like, yeah, guess what? Newsflash. You get flexible from committing to the practice. Right? Showing up and doing it. And that's karma and kriya, that action. It's karma. You're developing good karma with the wheel, right? Until it spins on its own and then you get to kriya. So if you're like, wow, this is shit. We've got all 5 dysfunctions. Yes, that means easy wins, right? Easy wins because he wrote the manual and all you have to do is follow the manual. He has a workbook. And these books that he writes are like, he has the humble... what is it? The Ideal Team Player. Have you read that one? Anybody? Ideal Team Player. This guy's he's the genius. Okay, so that's one book. The other is Ideal Team Player. These are books that honestly, like you can be batting an IQ of 100 and get through them, no problem. Okay, Ideal Team Player, which means other people can read them who might need to learn some of these lessons in a really nice way. So the other way that I get around that is there's certain things that I just don't lead. I have other people on my team lead. Lori's a people person. I'm a task person. So things that have to do with people, she leads and I get shit done, right? That we need done, right? And if I get caught up in people, we're doomed. Like we're done yesterday. Because first of all, I'm going to swear, right? I'm probably going to say things the wrong way, right? And I'll try and I'll learn and I'll grow, right? Like, and I get that that's the next word, but it's also like, oh, wait, what's your unique ability? Well, my unique ability is stuff like Witch's Cancer Journal and hanging out with you guys and figuring out what our new floors are and like doing this together and like growing the tribe and that whole thing. So this is easy. These are easy new who's. Meet Patrick, put them on your phone, just get the download, then decide who else needs to read this. Then use this plus liberating structures, this plus team. And then you're using us. Right. So like show up on Club Thrive stuff with Carmen and be like, I need to do this. And even like text Carmen over school and be like, Carmen, we need to do a workshop in here. And you can recruit Kristen and Lynn because they'll be all into like, yeah, we need to do a workshop in here. And like, how do we do liberating structures with Ideal Team Player? Because you all have that issue. Kristen's got to hire someone, right? Lynn's going to be, this is all in that interpersonal domain thing. And she's hungry and humble. Lynn's amazingly Lynn's already the Ideal Team Player. So when you're like, is this person an Ideal Team Player? Just think of Lynn. And if they're not, just be like, which part is it? There's only 3, hungry, humble, and what's the other third? I can't remember. Okay. That's it. And you guys can do that each section, right? So it's going to then come up multidimensionally. Although there'll be themes in the next 10X, there'll be certain themes where you won't have to worry about other things you had to worry about in the past. Like, I don't really have to worry about diet as much right now because like, I'm so clean. It's done. Like all the karma on that bullshit played out. And it's like, now it's done. I'm released from the death viper on that. I survived at the next level. That for some of you, it's like other stuff with, it can show up anywhere. I had this thing with banking, not a fan historically. Like my past self, like just would really get triggered by administrivia. Like, when you're like on hold with the bank and the paper's not going through and you need to sign this and like that. And I could get pretty clocked out and just be like, fuck it. I'm just going to like drift and figure it out. But I decided to tackle that one head on. So then I've made progress in it. Right. And then it's like, oh, that gives me an ability to do things really quickly with banking and financial stuff because I decided to get good at it. That's strengths to leverage, right? So it's like, what have you turned in? If we go back to this and figuring out the 10X and you look back at the past, so you're looking back to 10X, strengths to leverage. Do you guys remember this from, or maybe you've seen it in Master View curriculum? Strength to leverage versus strengths to develop. So to develop, you don't have them. Jovan, people skills, right? That's her next thing. She knows it though. She knows that'll like the death viper will get her every time unless she takes that to another level. So she has a clue of what the new 80% coming in is, right? Plus these books, plus when she gets the complete download from Lencioni, because that guy's just a complete download. Like once you get it, it's like, oh yeah, there it is. And then what are you leveraging? So that if we go back to here, that's everything, that innate ability to get the meta, right? To get the vision, the system, the people, like you're going to push hard on that. Like you get it. Trust that. That's your intuition. You're right. And was next. Okay, Lynn.
You had asked Jovan a question. So this is a clarifying question about a question you asked Jovan about something in her past. And it seemed like it was on your paper that you're showing, it was something in like either last minute, lack of decisions, poor management, like something from her past that she can bring with her. Was I understanding that?
Yeah, for her, because what I saw when Jovan was like, bam, 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 bam. Not everybody can, like imagine we're duck hunting and all of a sudden the ducks are like all over the place. And she's like, not everyone can nail it and actually be able to diagnose the problem. So what I would do with all of these next is I would define the exact behaviors. So you're just now looking, have you guys heard the hire, train, fire to the vision in culture? Have you guys heard that one? It's like a basic corporate blah, blah, blah. It's something that we can leverage that people who've been working with other people in corporate have figured out a long time ago. I was trained in it from Infusionsoft when I did a 2-year business training with Infusionsoft, or Keep is the software company, and they were helping small businesses grow. Hire, train, and fire to the vision and culture. So culture-based interview questions, right? If we look at training to the culture, that's a lot of what sounds like you're up to in your next 10X. Because imagine you lick this. Like imagine you're just like, Queen Jovan. And that's the vision you have to commit to. So what I like in our identity evolution worksheet is like, put a cape on it, name it, name this corporate or this company cohesion, the queen of company cohesion, whatever, like give it a name, right? Like you give it a name. And then it's like, you put the name on the wall. These are the behaviors that we have in this company. These are the behaviors we don't have in this company. We agree. These are the behaviors we are not doing anymore. When we are about to do one of these behaviors, this is what we're going to do next. This is what we're going to do instead. We're going to try this new thing. We're going to test it. Think big, test small, fail fast, learn always. It's not going to be right. It's going to be better though. It's our next iteration. That's all.
I just had one last connection. So then if Jovan doesn't want last minute activities, taking place at that new level because she wants it a different way, then is this the opportunity to look back at her past when she had maybe a turning moment, and then that would be considered a 10X moment? And I only ask because like for me and my planning skills, like that's taken me back to when I don't know, 7th grade, and I had to plan at least 7 days in advance and let my parents know. So that's clearly stuck with me for all that time. So I was just wondering like about how we
Fuck
can
yeah.
connect back to those.
Parenting, right there. Did everyone just hear what Linda said?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that reference point. I love that, Lynn. I like the past self reference point. If we just make, this is one of my like weird things, right? It's like I can make a worksheet out of anything. It's weird. It's really weird. So people start talking, I'm like, that's an activity. That's a thinking structure. That's an exercise. So if we just run this through, so planning. So Lynn's was planning 7 days in advance. So this is like, I want to go to the movies. And the parents are like, great, put it on the calendar. Give us a week.
In 7 days.
Right? Your parents.
Yeah, I like that you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like that you used values because one of mine that I have like hardcore wired since high school has been like, it is okay to say no. You know, like if the answer is no, like the answer can be no. And that's kind of where like the last minute stuff in the company culture is that like nobody wants the no, because the no doesn't mean it's canceled completely. It just means that like do it next year. Like it just means that it's not time right now. You're not far enough in your planning right now for it to be implemented right now. So can we include this for this year? No, do it next year. So it's like, I mean, maybe I need to change the language from like no to like yes next year so that people can hear it a little bit better. That's
I don't know, but what Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, there's this woman, I think it's called Go for No. Let me see if that's a book.
No?
It's a
Oh,
book.
I hope so, just for the title's sake.
So I think it is Go for No.
If it's not, you should write it, Jovan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you gotta help me with that, Kristen. I'm here for it.
Well, you know what we should do? We should make like a Club Hero book that's like yes, yes, no, no, and do the Go for No with the.
Oh my God.
So fun.
That'd be so good.
That'd be so easy. We have the team that like to make books super fast. Okay, Go for No. Yeah, here it is. I'll put.
We can't see your screen.
I know.
On this
one. I know. I'm just gonna put the. Well, okay, you guys want to see it? 4,932 ratings. See, I get jealous there. I get like that's where I get jealous, and jealousy for me is probably my smartest emotion. Why the fuck can't I share? Sorry, you guys. I'm new share. Go for No. Go for No. Yes is the destination. No is how you get there. 4,932 ratings for Richard Fenton and Andrea Waltz. Yeah. And used $1.50. Kindle, paperback, $12. You guys, when you need let me just say this and then I'll give it to you. When you need a download of something, because that's just a download. That's all that is. It's a value and it's a download, and she'll walk you through, or they'll walk you through a gazillion examples and make it super present. Decide whether you can actually read it, or if you want to just listen to it, or if you just want to watch some recap on YouTube. Because if you type that in, like maybe it's just a podcast and you just get it, and then you're just like, okay, now we come back here and we say Go for No. And then we go through old behaviors. And all Jovan is like looking for is, again, hire, train, fire to the value. So she's just helping people identify the behaviors. There might be 10 things happened last week that drove you fucking nuts, right? Because it was all these delayed yeses and all these, everyone just kind of kowtowing around each other. Everyone's afraid of a real conversation. There's no teeth anywhere in anything, right? And then she's like, okay, no, if we just use the subtitle, no is how you get there, right? Yes is the destination. No is how you get there. It's then defining what are new behaviors. What do you say no to? What do you say no to now? It's funny how no and now have very similar spellings, right? You had a W. James Altucher wrote a really good book on the power of no. Have you read that one? Yeah, Michael's read that one. The power of no. So these are the same thing. I'll just grab this and move it down. And then past reference point. And part of this can be like what happens when you don't, and then what happens when you do.
Share your screen again, Cate.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, Kristen. Or no, wait, Michael, you're up. What would you like to chat about?
So interesting to me that this is like our first time meeting, Cate. So as you were going through the beginning part of the lessons, I was writing down, as I've been through several of these like exercises through many different kinds of people. But it's a travel of the old self being, this is what I know, to a new self, this is what I want to know.
Ooh, I love it.
because we don't know what we don't know, you can't just, as you were using the pool analogy, jump out to the new floor. You have to go on a journey from old self to new self. So that journey is changing what I once believed to a higher level of understanding.
Yeah. There's very much like, if we look at higher level of understanding, if we look at dimensions,
Right.
right? If we look at understand, like here's the floor, what's under?
Exactly. So something, because there's a lot of language you're using that's going to be new to me and is exciting for me to learn as well, as I'm getting more into a chakra journey throughout this next year.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, through understanding is what brings the Dharma through you, right? Dharma being truth, and it flows. Doesn't mean people think they're actually speaking Dharma, but they have what they don't know instead of what they should know, right? An old belief I once had was that the 4 major food groups was meant to serve my body, right? A new belief I have now is that's an economic process for politicians and free trade. Perfectly fine, but there's different levels of knowledge between both of those understandings now, right? So when you were using the pool analogy, I was thinking,
pause there, because what I see in this is where culture has programmed out intelligence. I said it a different way back here. Let me see if I can find it.
It's exactly, we've been saying, like, everything you're talking about is like, yeah, I just know these with different words.
Yeah.
It'll come back to is when you're speaking of the pool.
It's in Which is Cancer. I wrote it in there when I was thinking about this. It's exactly that. So you guys, when there's, I told you guys about the sheep shearing videos. I think I have, right? I like to watch sheep shearing videos. Yeah. So have you guys ever heard the term wool blind? Has anyone ever seen a sheep that's wool blind? Yeah. So they can't fucking see because like the wool is like literally grown over their eyes. Like the wool, and it's sheep didn't used to need to be shorn, but like we breeded them to need to be shorn. Just to be clear, like nature didn't do this. We did this. Humans did this to sheep. But they can become wool blind if then we forget to shear them. Right. And it's like, that's what fell away. Right. It's like all of a sudden you're just like, you just literally, and I think this is why I'm obsessed with the sheep shearing videos is it just on peels and reveals the 20%. And then this coat, this 80% just falls away. And then you can see. So if you think of that in culture, it's like, what's the 80% of culture that's just bullshit to you now? You're just like, oh yeah, nice try.
Yeah, you can't throw that at me anymore. Every 5-7 years, you change the 4 major food groups. I also notice the change of hurricanes and what food's been wiped out and what America has more of and what Canada has more of. And it just all switches around, and then once your eyes are open to it, things become what is more clear. When you're using the pool analogy,
yes.
I was thinking when I was a kid.
And this goes to truth, true, right? Like that's what you're saying. Like all of a sudden the truth is revealed.
Yeah. And that's that higher level of understanding, which brings Dharma into your life and less karma through whatever pathway you're traveling. I was thinking of a dock when I was a kid, pulling yourself out of a pool, there's everything you talk about there. But when I was a kid, my grandparents living on a river, jumping off the dock, you can't touch bottom. If you did, it's all mucky anyway, so your foot would sink into it instead of pushing you up. And to get out of the dock was up a little higher. So it wasn't just like a pool where it's always just like right at your head.
Yeah, you got to reach for it.
So you had to really pull yourself to get up there. So as many of us were younger grandchildren, my father went and built us a metal ladder, which seems like it would be the perfect solution, right? You'd be able to go over a ladder and pull yourself up. The issue with the ladder was there wasn't enough rungs to it. So your knee had to pretty much come up to your chin with your hands up there to get your first foot on to then pull yourself. Could you do it? Yes, but there was so much momentum required to make it all happen from even the speed that you came at the ladder. You couldn't just waffle up to it. You had to kind of come in already a swinging fashion to keep the momentum going. All things that we learn through better understanding. You try something,
right?
Well, that parked, and then you add more things to it. So as you have this analogy here with the floor, I've always known this is kind of where I'm at in this journey right now. Yours is just a little more quicker to the point. Mine's a little longer, as I said at the beginning. It's a perfect day for a walk and look at the trees. For me, I've never really seen it as floor, so that is ground, and above the ground is oak tree, or tree in general. And then below the ground is roots.
Mm-hmm.
And I once had a dead stick in the ground at one point in my life, right? Consumed by alcohol, drugs, worry, stress, inability to understand what it meant to be a man in modern society. All these little things that came about from just having no education as a child to what love was, but tons of education to what it was not. And going through the journey of understanding when you fix the roots, the tree grows. Right. So I started really looking at where the weak roots were and where the strong roots were. And I now have what I think is a fantastic base, an amazing oak tree. And I have the visuals of having my kids are now 15 and 11. I see them as a single oak tree in the middle of a big field, no other trees around. And I am what they stand under, protect them from rain and storms. And there's a swing on there, and it's where we play, and it's where the sun comes, and it's always there. And no matter how much you try to shake or rock that oak tree, no. Other people may be able to shake me at this point in time in my life, but nothing my children can say or do shakes me. I'm to be the grounded one. And through that lessons, it's allowed me to learn more about myself. So I look at the roots every year to see what's got some poor fruit on it. What's got some rotten fruit? Every tree has a little rotten fruit here and there, and it's usually on the low hanging side as opposed to the top sides. So, I've looked back at this past year and I've looked at the poor roots, the poor fruit that I've had on my tree. There's nutrition. Do I think my nutrition is amazing? If I was to give it an 8 out of a 10, I'd give it an 8. But right now I got to knock that down to a 6. Because oddly enough, my microbiome is something that I was looking into changing for an elevation into my emotions, is something I've written down. Exercise. I do a marathon every year and started doing that in 2012. Did my fastest half marathon this year, beating it by 6 minutes, which, if you know anything about running, is really fucking faster. However, I blew out my quad around the 30K mark and did a nice little fast walk to finish, and had an hour and a half to think about what I want to improve through winter training, where I go more into the gym. Yoga has come because of my tight hips, and then also the chakra journey I was telling you about, all that coming together. Relationships. I ended a relationship with someone who you're not supposed to end relationships with, in order to open myself up to the love that it was blocking, which also had me throughout this past year notice some fruit that I already picked and chucked really fucking far away from people that 20 years ago we had great connections. Nowadays, you haven't grown and you're a waste of my time. But I love you and I hope the best for you in your future. Career. I spent the last 3 years alone. I wanted to involve that into being part of a team environment again that has a desire to go from their world-class experience to a higher world-class experience, and to give back more in support than on focus of money. One of my past companies, they gave a lot, but the bottom line focus was on money. And it gets really fucking frustrating when you're dealing with the front end people where, yeah, money's involved, but the exchange is in love and gratitude. And through that, we end up in these kinds of environments. And then spending versus investing. I'm happy with my money, but in order to 10 times what my bank account is, spending down, investing up, and what those mean. So right now I've picked off or labeled a lot of the fruit, and now looking onto the roots of what I know versus what I want to know. And you can probably, Cate, probably more than anybody else here, but I'm now new to the group. You may know that a lot of the things I threw out there is how I ended up meeting someone like Cate. A lot of my answers are going to come from Cate. A lot of my solutions are going to come through a new community that I've become a part of. My next level of Dharma is going to show up through next year's strong fruit and built roots. So
yeah,
that
to speak to the Indra's web part, right? Like that's where it's mutual. So then I can see parallels. And the same thing will happen, I think, with you with Jovan when she's coming to her team from like, okay, strengths to develop, pulling Lencioni's work. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, then you see your who's really differently. And then you're like, oh, they're actually looking for me to step into this level of leadership. So if it was all already good, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that. And it's like for my team with Michael coming in, like we've been looking for Michael as much as Michael's been looking for us, right? And there's just that like, and then because it's Indra's web. Remember how it's all vibrational there.
the value exchange. I know how to do the sales that you're looking for. And in exchange for that, I need to open up my ground chakras here and be able to loosen these hips and be able to stretch in a new way. What a great way of exchange for us, right? Like money falls into things, but exchange money is so far from, it's the last part of the ladder, right?
Yeah. And I think for a lot of us with looking at the 10X with money and the 20%, 80%, it's useful to just schedule that this week.
Like just know that it's at the top. But if you know all the things that you have to go from what I now know to what I want to know, and you do all those ladders, money falls last. You can't start a sales program and expect your big check to come on week one, right? You don't start McDonald's and expect to get a check the first day you walk in. You have to learn a few new things. You have to put in a couple weeks. And then even when you get that first check, there's a good chance that they're going to take off some money for the funny hat and the cool shirt you just got. And there's a good chance you had to buy shoes before you even got to show up. So what's left of that first check? There's so much of the understanding of, if you want it bad enough, your emotion will drive you to get it. And then once you have it, your logic will decide if you really want to keep it or not. Right? Buyer's remorse is rated in there. Really want that purse. Oh my God, all my friends have it.
All right. So what would be helpful in closing today? I'm just wondering, I would like on, in terms of like work for the week, I'd like for you guys to really get into what's the new floor, so that as we continue the conversation on the forum and as we continue here, that there's a definition. And so for like Jovan, the new floor, there's going to be a lot of behaviors at work. So it's not necessarily going to be her new floor as much as her in the position of, are you CEO? Is that your title, or what's your something like that? Operational director?
Equivalent. Yeah. Executive director.
Executive director. So that you're really clear on what are these behaviors. We go back, right? And it's based on the value, the old behaviors, the new behaviors, and the past reference point. Past reference point is super helpful to it helps you train to the vision. Because you're like, yes, yes, no, no. Past reference point, that was a yes. That was a no. And there's a no's then become the way to the yes, right? Like that's that whole point of that book, which maybe we need to read the book, maybe not. Maybe just getting that okay, I'll take their word for it. Yes is the way. So if we look at that in terms of all the things, all the categories, all the areas, and we're tapping deep into intuition, relying on the data from the past, right? Where's the rotten roots? Where's the rotten fruits? Where's the dysbiosis? Where's the eubiosis? And then what I like when you get a map of so this for me is like my working map of this. Why is it helpful to write it down? Why is it helpful to codify, to articulate, to use it to guide, to find the floor? If you can find your list and then test the fuck out of it for a week, just test it and see if it holds. When you proof something, well, it's like in math, but it's also in cooking, proofing something. You can proof yeast, right? And then you can prove the math theorem. It's like you're trying to prove it. And if it's nope, that didn't hold, then scratch it off, figure it out. Maybe this franchise thing isn't a thing. I don't know. I just keep running into it. It keeps running into me. It keeps trying to figure me out. I'm trying, it's no idea. And then yesterday I'm on the plane sitting next to Homer. You cannot make this shit up. So I'm sitting next to Homer, who's Greek Orthodox, this guy, literally. And he's ordering a scotch. We're on the plane going to Mexico. Salt Lake to there. It's like, I'm getting on the plane. It's 11:30 in the morning. I'm not thinking scotch, right? He is. He starts telling me about, and he's from Ogden, Utah, which is like a 99.5% Mormon town. And I'm like, Homer, people in Ogden don't drink scotch at 1 PM on the way to Puerto Vallarta. He's like, yeah, well, I'm Homer. So he's like up to here in like franchises. He just sold a company and released 500 employees from his responsibility, right? And he's like, yeah, I know, like the scale. So the who, not how. I had some questions about franchises that were just kind of coming up in my awareness in the last few weeks with these Club Thrive properties, et cetera, right? And then I'm sitting next to George, and he's like, tells me his whole history and all this stuff with franchising and how he started and blah, blah, blah. So George and I traded numbers. George is like 80, I'm guessing, right? Brilliant. So the who's are going to show up as soon as you do this. And in the process, like Jovan got a who, Patrick Lencioni's her new who. Okay, Lynn, Kristen, anything I can help with before we go, or want to just chime in on like what's coming up as we go through the convo?
Yeah, that values, the new worksheet that you just created. That will help me with my 10x moments that we started maybe 2 times ago or the last time, because I kept having my 10x moment in my life being like these more obvious points, like if I move or if I do something. And so here, if I look at it from my values, clearly, like that was a moment that had an impact on me, and I keep carrying it.
Yeah. So I'm guessing because a lot of your 10x is trusting your intuition, like really getting deep in there. And so noticing those, it's like back to the Bible versus the Vedas. Like the Vedas count everything. You're already data driven. Like, don't worry about counting the things. Don't count the 4 aims, Lynn. Go to the stories. Go to the biblical stories, right? Like your version of the stories or whatever they are, the Gilgamesh, right? And you're like, what are the stories that are coming out that your intuition is just serving you on a platter, like just through your memory, through your dream space, right? And you might find mourning. And if I would guess, if you find that you're in mourning for something that could have been, you're like 1000% on the hunt, like you're on the right track. Does that resonate? Or do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that does. Yeah, that does.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. Like, or something strikes a nerve, that expression, like, or it strikes a nerve, like that's where intuition rides in the nervous system physiologically. So then you're like, oh, that struck a nerve. And you might notice too, this happened to me a lot when I feel like I was kind of getting deprogrammed a bit, was like spontaneous catharsis through crying. Like all of a sudden you're watching a movie or like something happens or someone calls you and you're just like, oh my gosh, that normally doesn't tilt my ship or whatever. But all of a sudden you're just like, wow, cathartic physiological release. So Kriya, that's a Kriya. Kriya has also come up, like if you're doing a home practice, that might be a really good thing for you for like 10 minutes in the morning. It doesn't have to be long, but spontaneous movement. Like just notice how the body wants to move, crawling, hanging, swinging, all those will reawaken the primal movement. And like my daughter said to me last night, because I was waiting for them in the parking lot, and I was like, all right. So I go into like down dog and I start doing this like shaking, moving thing. And she was like, you're in the parking lot. I mean, it's like Mexico, it's hot and like there's no one around. Like, really? I can't just go into primal movement whenever the fuck I want? Like I have like the primal movement police. So I'm guessing that won't be your problem, Lynn, but you can think of me. Okay, Kristen, how do you want to end this?
This has all been super helpful. I was definitely more in listening mode. This call took a ton of notes. I think for me, I feel like I am in the dark, like I'm crawling through the dark right now. I have, I had a record-breaking month last month, felt amazing about where my business was heading and my goals. I've recently, in the last couple of weeks, gotten a lot of no's. And so I love the idea of the no's are leading to the yeses, and I'm having to pivot, and I am facing the reality that while yes, I need income, and so it's tempting to scramble and do the old things.
Yeah,
but they keep leading to these no's. So I know that I need to take time to work on my business and not in it, and do what I do for my clients and create a strategic plan and implement it in a way that it's been a year of scramble to build. And now I'm like, things are starting to fall apart and not work the way I thought they were going to. So I'm in a pivot place. I'm in a dark place. It's just, this is all very helpful. I just feel very like I'm like just walking through darkness right now.
So I would look at that, defining the future client, the future type of work, like what really is a yes. And I mean, this is where 10X is hard, you know, and Ben, he talks about what that looks like. Like when you, like, it's not a joke, like the 10X, it's like, it's inconceivable to the rational mind. And if it's not that, it's impossible, right? So if it's not that, if it's not inconceivable, you're not there yet. So like for Jovan, it's like this company is like clicking, right? It's clicking, and she's seeing all the yes behaviors, and it, like if someone pulls a no, it's almost like a joke, right? It like becomes part of the company culture of like, oh, remember the time one? Yeah, I remember that. That was a good one. Yeah, that was a, you know, so defining, Kristen, of like, what is your dharma with work at 10X? Like, what's the revenue? What's the client type? And then you might read that book because you're looking for rejection in a way to like get to know the industry, to get to know what's going on out there, to get to know like, who are they saying yes to? What are those people doing? Like, I mean, I think you go both very logical, rational, but also pretty mystical on it. Intuitive, mystical, to like, what are you really, who are you called to work with? What are you really called to do? I had an idea for us as this case study with Lynn and Sandy Chapman and Krista Grasso, that might be cool for you. Like where we're looking at like a complete company operational rebuild, right? And for you to like tell the story of it or whatever, like help companies do that, like use us as the case study. I want the case study to be useful to everybody involved. So like for everybody, it adds something. It's that whole Indra's web, right? It like adds something that's like, see it in a different way, right? The whole vibe, everything at that Indra's web, the interconnectedness of the who's does something. So we use Krista's background in lean ops because she's black belt with small company lean ops. We use Sandy Chapman's strategy. She's black belt strategy, right? And it's like, who's showing up? Who needs to be involved? And then get curious about that. Because sometimes when you're dark in the hole, you can feel like it's all dark. But then you're in the Ayurvedically speaking, the problem of like increases like, right? If like all you're seeing is dark, then and you're dark, then it's like, where's the light, right? And you're just like, keep going towards the dark. So say Jovan stays in the problem of only seeing the problems, right? It's like, well, like increases like. So the more you see the problems, the more you see the problems. That's different than the solutions, right? Because there's other people at work that can see the problem, but Jovan can see the solutions to the problems. And then she can guide the company up and out of where they are now to there, which is why she's in the position she's in. And she looks back and she's like, that plays to my unique abilities. That plays to my innate strengths. That plays to all these other life experiences I've had that are like now like keyed up for leverage. Now it's like, okay, 10X, like time is now. It's super curious what starts showing up, Kristen. That's how I would look at it too.
Mm-hmm. That what's showing up is always interesting. I always found that the best advice I got when I felt like I was in the darkness was a guy, Mike Canings, had explained to me that he spent $1 million a year on coaching. And that was all kinds of coaching, from golf to tennis to relationship to business. And he said when it came to business and he felt in the dark, he was at a point in his life where he was never paying someone to coach him something new. He just paid people to coach him, to remind him of what he already knows and when to implement it.
And when to implement the timing, right? The what and the when. I love it.
When we're dark, we can't. That's that stigma, the wool blindness, as he put it, stachoma, that can't see where it's just there's a dark spot there. It takes someone to remind you something you already know to release it.
Claudia Welch and I, when we were teaching that healthier hormones a decade ago, she reminded me of this teaching that I first came across in Diane Stein's The Women's I Ching, which is time awaiting and time moving forward. Because you know how like when you walk in the dark, like you sometimes like stub your toe or like you hit your head on something because you're just like, oh fuck, I couldn't see that. So it's like, it's almost like enjoying the waiting for the light without impatience, right? Like without like, oh, it needs to be a different way than it is right now.
Yeah. And to be clear, there are moments of light. And I know from looking back at my 10Xs in the past, it's very intuitive for me. So I'm trying to just tap into that mystical and listening and curiosity, but it does feel like waiting. And that is something I'm not good at doing. Historically, I think that is my
reframe on that with strengths to develop, like strengths to develop, right?
Yeah.
Like go with that with strengths to develop. Like what new strengths am I developing through this?
Right.
All right. That was a blast. Sorry, we went over. I'll post all our pretty pictures that are so helpful for your worksheets. I'll be in touch. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. So up level your life is when you're like, you know what? I'm ready to go to a higher level. There's a higher order. In that higher order, there's a people set, a skill set, a tool set, and even a mindset. And so up level your life. If you click in here, I'll quickly walk you through how to up level your life. If you are then a good fit for Club Hero, where we help you soup to nuts, make that idea happen, where in up level your life, you'll create the vision. We'll see what the real critical issues are. We'll tap a little bit into strategy so that you have a good idea of what you would do in Club Hero. If the investment makes sense, because the return on the investment of doing it, when you're living at a higher order, you've much more capacity, much more opportunity. You're feeling better because you've up-leveled your body, you've up-leveled your purpose, you've up-leveled your connections, you've up-leveled your investments. So it's really easy to get good return on investment. If that sounds good and you're like, this conversation resonates, then you just start right here with up-level your life.